What's going on, you loyal listeners? Thank you for tuning in to the L Squared podcast. I'm your host here, Luke Larson, and joining me today, as per the unusual, my lovely and loquacious special guest who will be assisting me in leisurely launching you into levity, director of the new film BURDER, showing at the South Dakota Film Festival right now, Charlie Hankin. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Wow, thank you for that incredible introduction and for inviting me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I told you this, Charlie, but loyal listeners, BURDER is one of my favorite films showing this year. So hilarious.
Oh, thank you.
I've watched it probably 4 times now, 4 or 5 times. Just so funny the whole time.
Oh, thanks.
So just to let you guys in, I'll read the synopsis here. I always appreciate when a film has a synopsis because synopses are very hard to write.
That's true. Boiling it down to a sentence or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. It's a real art. But so BURDER is about a young birdwatcher runs for his life after witnessing a bird-on-bird murder. When he finds himself cornered, it's man versus bird, and only one can make it out alive.
Well done.
Thank you. So, like I said, I just had a smile on my face the whole time. Watched this every time I've watched it. It's so funny. But so how did this project come about?
Well, I'm a cartoonist, sort of by trade and by reputation. I'm a gag cartoonist for the New Yorker magazine. And I've been getting more and more into animation over the course of several years, but my background is really like pure humor. So, the New Yorker cartoons are not editorial cartoons. They don't generally like process current events or anything. It's just jokes for jokes' sake. So that's sort of my background and my sense of humor to start with. And that has, regardless of my experience drawing for magazines, has kind of been my sensibility in making short films also. And for years and years, I was making sketch comedy as part of a duo called Good Cop, Great Cop with my comedy partner, Matt Porter. So and the sketch comedy stuff is also like, it's filmic. They're like short films as opposed to being like live comedy theater. But my background again was completely in just like comedy, pure comedy, I guess I would say. And so when it came to BURDER and I was looking for a new idea, I was doing a lot of writing and just trying to find something that I could really get obsessed with and stay enthusiastic about for the amount of time that it takes to animate an entire short film by hand, which I was working alone, so it takes a really, really long time. And I guess I think the script for BURDER was kind of the first thing that I had written in that chunk of time of just trying to be creative and make stuff for my next film. It was the first one where I was like, okay, this is making me laugh. And even though it's really, really stupid or something, it's very like unpretentious. I really have a lot of love for it. And I would love to see this be finished myself. So that was enough for me to be able to say like, okay, the script is funny. I could see myself like having a good time storyboarding this and then eventually animating it. And I have ideas for how to voice the characters and stuff. So that was it. I mean, that's a very long sort of non-answer because it has nothing to do with birds and I have no personal relationship to bird watching or like witnessing crime or anything, but
or fighting a bird in hand-to-hand combat.
I wish I had some sort of amazing anecdote about like, this is based on a true story, but of course it isn't. So, it's made up. That's the answer to your question.
That's great. So like animation seems like it's always a labor of love and so much time is put into it, way more than people would think. So how long did it take you to make this?
Oh man. Well, it's a little bit hard to say for sure. I mean, I have a start date that's really, really clear because I can just open up the project files on my hard drive. And I think the sort of ultimate irony is that if I look at the created by date on the script, the earliest existing part of it, it's something like March 9th of 2020. So it accidentally turned into this pandemic project because it was like the last possible moment to be making a short film where you're like, this is just a normal short film that I'm making. And then instead it wound up being kind of like my passion project during lockdown and like emerging from lockdown. And but I don't have a good tally on exactly how long it took because I got busy with other stuff in the middle. Again, I'm like a gigging writer and artist, and so like I was working on BURDER, and week after week and eventually month after month, it was a consistent project. But in like August of last year, I went into production on an animated series for the Sci-Fi Network called The Summoner, which I worked with a studio, Stupid Buddy, who does Robot Chicken, and a really nice animation house based in Toronto called Solus Studios. And so we all collaborated on this show called The Summoner. In fact, if anybody is looking at the video of this, you can see a poster for it in the background of the Zoom call happening right now. I'm pointing to it in the background of my shot. But yeah, so the Summoner took up a ton of time, and now if anybody's interested, you can watch it on Peacock. The whole thing is streaming for free. So then I had to put down BURDER for a little while I did this other thing. And all told, by the time it got to like mixing the sound and hiring a guy to compose the score for it, we're talking about probably May or June of this year. So again, like other than literally those two things, sound mixing and scoring, I did everything myself. And probably the total time commitment is like all of my free time, all of my downtime for the better part of a year. So, and the short BURDER is 5 minutes long. So that gives you a sense of just how hard it is to do all this stuff as a one person show.
Yeah. Wow. Incredible. And it really comes across that, you've really put your heart and soul into it, I think. But what made you want to get into animation?
A childhood obsession that I never grew out of. Partly, I think it's a personality type thing because a lot of people like watching cartoons, but I do think that you need a certain type of temperament in order to make them yourself. And I do have a personality type that meshes really nicely with long, meditative, like immersive work. So I really sparked to it. As a kid, I would do experiments and make flip books, and then I sort of turned away from it for a little while. I got really into fine art painting and doing art in other forms and drawing cartoons in high school for my high school newspaper and stuff. So I was always sort of animation adjacent for a little while. And then as an adult, basically, I got more serious about it. And I sort of discovered the work of Richard Williams, who was the animation director on Who Framed Roger Rabbit, who wrote a really remarkable book about doing animation called The Animator's Survival Kit, I think. And since then, that was several years ago, and since then my horizons have broadened considerably, and he's not everybody's favorite animator, but in terms of providing a good entryway into learning the craft of making drawings come alive and move and talk and emote, his stuff was really indispensable. And so, yeah, like, especially these days, there's just so many resources online, and you can watch YouTube tutorials and you can get free software. And so it's a really good time to be obsessed with making animation, but you do need to have that sort of fastidious and dedicated personality type where you can commit months of your life to making a movie one frame at a time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's tough to think of. I mean, I went through a phase where I liked to draw, and I still draw sometimes. I like to sketch stuff, but I'm just like, I get to a point where I'm just such like not a perfectionist that I'm just sort of like, I just want to get this done, you know? And
That's
so
a
like,
great that's a great quality though, to just it's more important for something to be finished than for it to be perfect.
yeah, I appreciate that. And I think you're right, because I think that's like, it is sort of a mix of those things, because like people tend to say like artists feel like a lot of times art's never finished. You just have a deadline when you're done, when you quit editing it, you know.
Yeah.
But even like, especially the really um the people that, the auteur directors and things, like they'll say like, yeah, it's like the one that you guys see is like 95%, but it's just it I had to quit tinkering with it at some point. And yeah, so I would have to think, with animators, especially like you said, when it takes you that long to do a 5-minute short, I mean, yeah, you could probably sit there on every single frame and edit till forever. You could take a year on every frame if
Yeah, the nature of the medium is that you have complete executive control over literally every pixel of every single frame. And it's a really daunting amount of power to have, because you're exactly right. You can fiddle with every single line and every single color, shade and tint that you can find in a frame. It's an astonishingly bad way to make a movie. It's the opposite of being able to just pick up a camera and point it at the thing that you want to capture. Instead, you have the freedom and the terror of a blank canvas, but it's a blank canvas that refreshes 12 times a second. So yeah, it's very easy to sort of get lost in it, and being unprecious is a huge part of the process, because you're never going to get anything done if you're obsessing over making every frame perfect.
Do you have like a stopping point in your mind where you're like, okay, I need to stop obsessing with this specific thing and move on to the next?
Yeah, I mean, if if there were a fly on the wall watching me animate, it would assume that I am psychotic, because I talk to myself all the time, and one of the like phrases that I keep saying is like, I got to stop now, or this is taking too long, and I guess it's not like a rigid stopping point, but if
Mhm.
I'm obsessing over the quality of motion of some particular thing, in Birder, oh man, I should think of a specific example of this. Like, there's a moment, there's a moment where the main character, Nick Bird, gets a donut stuck on his nose, and he's trying to take it off of his nose. And this is sort of technical, but the way the animation works there is, instead of running at 12 frames a second or less, which is typical for animation for the most part,
Mhm.
it's running at truly 24 frames a second, which is the fastest frame rate achievable in a conventional film setting. But it requires you to do 24 drawings for every second, which is twice as much as you would normally do. So, but for that one shot where he's trying to peel the donut off his nose, and he's straining as hard as he can, and then his head pops out of it. I was just spending so much time drawing frame after frame and getting this back and forth seesaw motion as the thing is, straining against his grip. And that was a case, I think, where at a certain point, I was said, this is taking too long. And I didn't give up. I didn't stop animating it, but it was a check. It was like a way to remind myself, like, okay, there's still another minute and a half, 2 minutes left in this movie. I have to finish this so I can get on to the next shot. Although that animation turned out to be some of my favorite in the entire short.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful, and it really, everything really runs very smoothly. That was one thing I wrote down, was that everything moves. I didn't notice any rigidity in it at all. I was like, this is really a smooth operation here. It really
Thank you.
flowed one into the next. Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
So is there like I was gonna ask, like, So what are some things you don't like about working in animation?
The fact that you can only make one film a year if you do it the way that I do it. I mean, like, it's a really hard question to answer because anyone who is doing animation is doing it exclusively because they love it. Because if you don't 100% adore the process, there's absolutely no reason to do it. It's just so punishing to work so slowly and have to wait so long for something to be finished. I would say, like, it's the opposite of instant gratification. That's probably a big part of it. You learn to become satisfied with the tiniest little dose of gratification. It's the tiniest little accomplishment, I guess. It's a good day when you can animate 3 seconds or something, you know? But yeah, I would say, going back to what you were saying before about it's more important that it's finished than that it's perfect. I think the frustration that, like, anybody who's shooting a movie by picking up a camera and pointing it at actors can make a short film in a month or a week or a day or whatever. And that with animation, it's a completely inelastic medium. You're just stuck with it taking however long it takes. And the only way to do it faster is to do it worse or to make a shorter movie. But there's stories that don't take 60 seconds to tell. They really do require a full short film duration. So yeah, I would say that the fact that, you know, if I race my brains out for the entire rest of my life, that if I create, you know, a short film a year that's 5 minutes long and I live for another 50 years, then all told, I've made 55-minute films. It's such a lower yield in terms of screen time. That's so much less. That's the equivalent of, I can't do the math, 250 minutes. How many feature films is that? It's like 3 movies, two feature films, something like that. So I think the fact that it's a very low yield art form when you do it alone is probably the most frustrating thing about it.
So did that go into, like, your idea for BURDER? Was it like you were like, I want to make something that I can finish that isn't like...
Absolutely not. No,
not at all.
In fact, because I've been burned by that in the past, and my earlier short films are all available online, and I don't want to talk anybody out of liking anything that I've made in the past. But everything is a learning experience, and every film I make builds on top of what I learned from the previous one. And there are definitely 1 or 2 instances of short films that I've made in the past precisely because the way that I was making them was designed to be fast, and I regret it. There are earlier films of mine where I'm like, this would be a great exercise in doing something that only takes 6 weeks, and I absolutely don't stand by the aesthetics of it, the look of it, or, you know, just the nature of the finished thing. Again, I hope people find something to like in all of my short films. But there was nothing about BURDER where I was like, I finally figured out a way to make something makeable. It's the opposite. It's the longest duration of a finished thing that I made, and it takes place over, like, for a 5-minute short film, there are like a lot of different locations, and I'm not an especially fast or proficient background painter, so I found myself like learning on the fly how to paint landscapes and like storefronts and shop interiors and stuff, and it was just like absolutely concocted to be impossible to finish. But I was just so obsessed with the idea that I wanted to get through it at all costs.
Yeah. Do you have like a dream project that you would love to be able to do at some point? Is there like a white whale out there?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, the short answer is no, mostly just because I'm so used to thinking in terms of premises and ideas that I could just sit down and make. But I think that I probably would have an answer to that if I knew that I had a big crew. Like I had a crew on the Summoner on Peacock, and that was a really different story where I was like, oh, I literally can do anything. And the animation house is painting the backgrounds, and it really opened up a world of possibilities. So that the Summoner is really different and has a lot bigger scope than any of my short films. But I think if someone sat me down tomorrow and said, like, hey, get ready, it's time to make a feature film, and these are your crew, and let us know what you want to do, which obviously is an absurd fantasy. But I think I have a couple of ideas. I think that I would like, maybe I would like to make something that isn't just straight comedy, but it's a lot harder to do that because I think there's a zillion people out there making drama and making stuff that is like a really, really serious, and it's a really crowded playing field. And I feel pretty secure in my skill set when it comes to writing comedy. And I don't know, I haven't given myself permission to really stop doing comedy. So maybe one day I would say doing something that is genre defying or something that's not straight comedy, but sure. I don't know, that's the closest I have to a real answer.
Well, I'll take it. And yeah, I think you should definitely, for what it's worth, feel secure in your comedy writing, because it was, I mean, hilarious.
Oh, thank you.
The unique voice was just throughout and unexpected, and I loved it. So loyal listeners, check out BURDER at southdakotafilmfest.org right now through the 25th. Go check it out. It's awesome. And check out on Peacock. What was the name of it again?
The Summoner.
The Summoner on Peacock. Do you have anything else you want to plug before we get out of here?
Follow me on Instagram. My handle is at Charlie Hankin. That's M-E and then my name, Charlie Hankin. I post new cartoons whenever I have them, and you can see some stuff that's not just animated. There's gag cartoons and stuff from the New Yorker on there too.
Very cool. And as always, you can find me on Twitter at LukeLarson89. Find this podcast at L Squared Podcast on Twitter, on Instagram. You can find us on Facebook at L2 Podcast. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. And check out Charlie Hankin. Check out his work. And thank you again for coming on the show. And until next time.
All right. Thank you.